The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about CDL training for local public agencies. And since I'm the only one on here doing both the moderation and the presenting, if someone could please throw a question in the question box or just a hello to make sure that you guys can hear me, I would appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm glad you can hear me. This is Victoria Beale with the Ohio LTAP Center, and this afternoon we are going to talk about how your agency can do CDL training. And the CDL training is going to be a combination of a resource that we have available for you through the LTAP Center, and then some resources you have access to through what's called Clear Roads. So in addition to the slides for this webinar, which I placed in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel, I have an outline about what I'm going to talk about for you too. So you don't have to frantically take notes as we go through this. The outline is pretty much going to be your notes for you. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have as we go through the webinar. We are attempting to record it, and if we're successful, we'll post it on our YouTube page. But please feel free to ask whatever questions you have, because if you have a question, more than likely someone else on the webinar has that same question. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and start moving forward. As I said, my intent today is really to talk about how your agency can do CDL training. And in order to do that training, there are two components to it, meaning two pieces. There is the theory, and then there's behind the wheel. So what Ohio LTAP can assist you with is the theory. And what you can do at your agency is the behind the wheel. And it's kind of like the philosophy of teaching someone to fish and then they can catch fish themselves for the rest of their lives. Well, what I want to try to do here is to teach you where the resources are that you can set yourself up to fish, to be able to train people yourself for the behind the wheel portion. And then hopefully that'll help your agency moving forward, because I know it's become very difficult to find qualified CDL drivers who want to work for local agencies and plow snow. And a lot of times you have to take them in and train them yourself. So this should help you with that. All right, so the two parts, as I said before, theory and behind the wheel. And really, the first question you've got to ask yourself, and your agency needs to ask, is do you have someone who is willing to teach that behind the wheel training? If you don't, then you're pretty much finished at that point, because the behind the wheel takes an actual instructor who's going to take people out in the vehicle who are going to learn from them. And, it's just like the old-fashioned driver's ed. I don't know how many of you, did it back in the day like I did, but you had somebody sitting in the car with you and you drove around and, they taught you. And this is what the behind the wheel portion is. So in order for someone who is willing to teach, that's the first requirement. They got to be willing to do it. They also have to meet some other requirements. And as I said, this is on the outline too that you can download, and we'll email these out, the handouts, both of them to you after the webinar concludes. But, you want to know if first off, the person who's willing to teach, do they have a CDL the same, meaning the same class or higher? Someone who has an A can definitely teach the B, but someone who has a B cannot teach the A, because the A is considered the higher class of the CDL license, and any kind of endorsements that they would be teaching. So if they have that, and that's an and, they have to have 2 years minimum of experience operating a vehicle with that same type of CDL license that requires it. So at least 2 years. If they're going to teach the A, they have to have operated a vehicle that requires a CDL A for 2 years, or a CDL B if that's the license they're going to teach, for 2 years, or they have a minimum of 2 years experience as a behind the wheel instructor. So I don't know how you get to that third one without having the first two, but I would say just focus on the first two requirements there. So this is a conversation with us today. So if you have questions as we're going through this, please drop them in the question box. I can even unmute you. If you'd like me to unmute you, just put it in the question box and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question, through the audio portion. But, you have somebody that's willing to teach, and then do they have the CDL license that they would be teaching, and have they had it for at least 2 years with 2 years experience? So if you have that, then you're in luck because you can set up a program. If you don't have it, then you can't set your program up. So hopefully nobody's going to drop off the webinar at this point. But you definitely need to have that threshold requirement met. So once you know that you can move forward with setting up the behind the wheel training, that's when you then start getting the pieces together to get your program rolling. And the first piece is going to be the theory training information. Now, through Ohio LTAP, we've actually set up the CDL theory training, and it's available for your agencies online at no cost. You can have them do CDL A, a B, or an upgrade from a B to an A. And they do have to complete the theory training and the test at the end. We've had some folks who've taken all 30 modules for CDLA and said they were done and didn't understand why they hadn't been reported in for having completed the training, but they hadn't taken the test. So there are modules and then there's a test that goes along with it. Now I'm going to hop out of this presentation off and on today because I want to share some resources with you. And the first one I'm going to share with you is our LTAP website. And I do see there's some questions coming into the question box, so I will address those in just a minute. But our LTAP webpage, and the link to this is in both the handout, the outline, and the PowerPoint. So you don't have to worry about trying to copy this down or take a screenshot right now. But on our CDL theory training page, we give you information about how the license changed, the license being the requirements for training to get the license changed, a link to the Federal Motor Carriers webpage, and then below we have a list of the modules for A and for B and for the upgrade from B to A. I will tell you there's only one module difference from the B to the A. So if they're going to get a B, they might as well do the 1 extra hour module and go ahead and get the A. But that's up to you in your agency. That's what I would have them do it if it was me. I'm going to go ahead and look at a couple of these questions real quickly. All right, is the 2-year experience as a behind the wheel CDL trainer requirement statutory? And then they asked Ohio law or clearinghouse. I can tell you it is a statutory requirement, and I will send out the information about where that law is at. It is a federal law. Ohio law doesn't actually apply in what we are doing with the training in the local public agencies, and I'll explain to you why. The Ohio law applies only to entities or agencies that are offering the training for payment, meaning that they are collecting money from people in order to train them. The majority of local public agencies, and definitely through our center here at LTAP, we're not charging anyone. So the Ohio law doesn't apply to us as what they call a private training provider. There's another question that's come in. It says, when registering to be a training provider, do we have to designate the individual instructor? And can we alternate between multiple instructors? And I'm going to talk about this again a little later, but just to answer your question there, when you register as a training provider, you register your agency. You don't register individuals. So you can alternate between multiple instructors. It's your agency. So if you were, say, I'll pick on a county, Montgomery County, and they were going to register. You would register as Montgomery County. You wouldn't register the instructors who were training for Montgomery County who worked there. So hopefully that answers your questions. All right, so here on our presentation, we do have a link to that page I just showed you. So the theory training is out there and it's available at no cost. It'll cover all three of those license types. And what happens is when the training is completed through LTAP, we have 48 hours then to report that completion into federal motor carriers. So I think the part you're most interested in, though, which is going to be the heavier lift for you, is going to be setting up your behind the wheel training. And that's what the majority of this conversation we're having today is going to focus on. But I'm kind of taking you step by step through. Okay, if I'm going to set up a program, what question do I have to ask and get answers to in order to move to the next step? So we're now up to what I would consider step 3, which is, how to set up your behind the wheel training program. So hopefully by answering that beginning question about do you have somebody who can train, you already know who's going to be your instructor. So what I'm going to talk to you about next are the instructor tools that are available. And here is where we have really, really gotten lucky. There's this program called Clear Roads. And what it is a bunch of the state DOTs like ODOT who got together and they have pooled their money. They put in so much money every year for different resources to be developed or created around snow plowing and snow and ice removal. One of the things a project that they had was to create training for CDL for snowplow drivers. And you can download the materials to do the behind the wheel training at your agency from this website. I've put their link at the bottom here, but I'm also going to take you out to their website so you can see what it is that they have available. Now, I would love to just package up their materials and put them out on the LTAP website for you to download, but I can't do that because you need to request it from them directly. And that's because they are tracking how many times they got downloaded and by who, so they can report back, how well that $199,986 that was spent on this project, um, you know, how well that was used. So you do have a link to the Clear Roads website, this project in particular, in your download materials that we're going to send you after the webinar as well. But in order to get access, all you have to do is there's a request form. You can click on the link. I did it in order to get access to the materials I'm going to show you. And they actually will give you materials for both the theory and the behind the wheel. So if you choose to use the LTAP online theory training, you don't have to worry about that part of what you're going to download. If you want to teach your theory training in-house yourself, then the materials are there for you. But through ODOT, we already took those materials and turned them into the e-learning. We were trying to save a little time for folks out there, and we knew we could offer that online. But the behind the wheel absolutely has to be done in person. No simulators. It's a live instructor. Obviously the person there actually driving, and then your trainee, the only time that counts for them is the time they're actually driving the vehicle, even if you've got maybe more than one person out there with you. If they're just riding along, that doesn't count towards any of their training. They need to actually be the one driving the vehicle. So anyway, this is the website. You click that link and the rest of the web page explains what this program is and how you can use it. They did a webinar back in 2021 you can look at if you're interested. And there's a final report and a fact sheet and a brief sheet. So they try to put information out in all these different ways. But what you get when you come here, and I'm going to show you, let me drag this over onto my screen here, is there's a download package, and in that package, they're going to have these files. Now, it comes as a zip file, and it comes from Dropbox. The link that they'll send you, they'll actually send you an email with a little box you click on there, and Dropbox is a file sharing um, website where people can load files into, and they give other people access to them. If you've never experienced that, it's not that hard to access at all. If you're in a bigger agency, you might have to talk to your IT folks if they've blocked something like that. But when it comes right down to it, they should give you access because you have a valid business reason, and make sure you tell them that. Once you get access to the files and download them, the behind the wheel training is in there. They even have hazmat classroom training if you want that. There are instructor resources. The theory training PowerPoints are there, and train the trainer information's there. So I'm going to hop back out to my PowerPoint, and we're going to keep talking about these different pieces, and then I'll come back to that. So, sorry, I have to keep swapping this view out here. In those packages that I just showed you, when it talked about train the trainer, there's actually a PowerPoint in there that does a really good job of going through what someone who's going to be your behind the wheel instructor needs to know and what they need to do. And I would encourage you, give them this as their beginning place as far as what their responsibilities are going to be. Have them thoroughly review this PowerPoint, because it'll explain to them all the pieces that go along with that behind the wheel training. And I do have that PowerPoint pulled up right now on my screen here. I just wanted to show you some pieces and parts of that. It goes into what their qualifications are, vehicles and equipment. And this would be good for you as well if you're not going to be the actual instructor, but someone who's overseeing it to go through before maybe you even talk to somebody about being an instructor. So you have a good handle on what's going on, because there are in this package that comes from Clear Roads lesson plans for the instructor to use. And then there's daily lesson guides and checklists, and we're going to talk about both of those next. An instructor who was teaching, once they went through this PowerPoint, would need to set up, what they want to teach each day. And they've got here this is a sample of a lesson plan that's in there. And the lesson plans are very thorough. It gives them a description about what they're going to be teaching, what it's based off of in the CDL law, what it is that they're supposed to accomplish with the students, and then the materials they're going to need, some questions that should be answered as a part of the lesson, and then what they need to do to take them out in the range and then the road to get this completed. So I would have them go through, and I'll show you. I'm going to pull up the instructor resources here so you can see that. I would have them go through, each of the lesson plans. And again, this is all in the same file folder. I just opened Windows up ahead of time, so I would be where I needed to be to show you this. But the public road lessons, the range lessons, you want to start in the range first. That's the off the road in the parking lot lessons. And then they can go through and set up, read the lesson plans through and figure out how they want to accomplish that, whether it's, one day a week, or maybe you take a couple of weeks and try to knock through the information and commit them out there to getting this done. And then they have the road portion too. Once they accomplish the range, then they have the lesson plans for the road. So it's all laid out here. If someone who's interested in teaching, I would think that they would jump right into that and start working through, the schedule of how they would set that up. And then another resource that's available that goes right along with that are the check sheets that it talked about. And here, again, this is coming out of that same download from Clear Roads. This is the road and the range. And what would happen is they could use these various check sheets to actually document the proficiency when they go out in the field. So I've got a couple of them already open here. So like this one is the second one in the range area. It's a sheet that they would use to document the straight line backing technique. And then it talks about, what they could possibly say and go over with the students. And then, at the bottom, the back page, they actually give them a place to put in the documentation to show, you know, who it was, who they are as an instructor, what time they started and ended, their comments and whether or not they felt proficiency was achieved. So what I would do if I was an instructor for the behind the wheel portion is I would set up a 3-ring binder with these check sheets in it for each person who was in my training. And let me pull that back up. So it'd be a 3-ring binder and it would have different sections in it because you're going to put multiple copies possibly of these sheets in there, the same sheet over and over again. Because like with the straight line backing, say you get them out there and it takes them 3 days to get this technique down, you're going to end up with 3 of these sheets showing the progression of the days. you know, Maybe it was a Tuesday and then a Wednesday and a Thursday that took them to get this figured out and become what the instructor felt was proficient at it. So the instructor would have a Tuesday sheet and then a Wednesday sheet and a Thursday sheet. And you'd want to keep all those in the binder. And you keep all of that complete for each of these task areas in the binder until they've completely passed and the instructor signed off on them. And then you put it away for 3 years and keep it because you want to make sure that you're keeping your records showing the progression of the training for that time period. So I've kind of jumped ahead a little on my PowerPoint, so I'm going to get back over here and we're going to keep going with that part of the presentation. So we talked about the fact that there's a instructor train the trainer PowerPoint in there. And then there's also resources, like I said, that the instructors can use, the lesson plans for the behind the wheel for both the range and the road. And then they have and I showed you what the lesson plans look like. And then I've also showed you the check sheets that accompany the lesson plans. And everything is numbered and lettered in here the same way it is in the CDL law. So it doesn't make you hunt and peck and look for things. It goes right along with the way the law is written. So if you looked at the law, 2.1 for the A or the B would be the vehicle inspection, the pre-trip, the en route, the post-trip. And then the back page is where, like I showed you, you would document their progress in achieving a proficiency on each of these tasks that they need to know how to do in the CDL vehicle. So to me, keep it simple. Have a 3-ring binder for that individual. Go with the same numbering that they have on those sheets where we talked about, I'm going to go back over here to I guess I didn't have the numbering up there, sorry. We'll go here. So section 2.1, I would number it, list it, label it the same, and keep those sheets behind a tab in the 3-ring binder to show, each day that the person was out with the instructor and the range, or if it's a road technique they're trying to learn on the road and the progress they've made. Because if you get audited, what they're going to be looking for is proof that your instructor did what they were supposed to do in taking the person out over and over again until they showed that they were proficient. So definitely, work to keep it simple. Also, you need to remember that adult learners are different than when we were in school. What they want is something that they can apply immediately. So for the behind the wheel portion, I would not try to do any classroom type all together at one time. I would, if you need to have a little classroom overview or something of one of those topics, do it and then get right out there to actually apply what you've just talked about. make sure that you're following through with that immediate application of the learning to the task. Um, Also, folks do learn at different speeds, so flexibility needs to be key with your behind the wheel training. It might take one person a little longer to learn some of the range techniques than it does someone else, but when they get out on the road, it might be backwards in the sense that the person that took longer on the range will take less time on the road, and the person that took shorter time on the range might take longer on the road. So your instructor, whoever you pick, needs to have patience. You want to make sure that the person, understands that they're working with other adults and they just want to do the very best they can to mentor them and guide them through this. So we talked about getting your instructor figured out, making sure they meet the requirements. You can do the theory training through LTAP. We've discussed how to go about using the Clear Roads resources for the behind the wheel portion of the training. The next part that you need to do is you need to set up an account with the federal motor carriers. And it's not difficult to set up. You do have to get your account set up there through the login.gov, and they're going to require two-factor authentication. For those of you who haven't done that before, basically it's where you set up with your cell phone to have a code sent to prove it's really you. So if you've ever had to get into your Amazon account or another account and they said, oh, send us the one-time code that we just sent you via text message, that's what they mean by two-factor authentication. Don't let that scare you off. It's really not that hard to set up. And, once you've got this account set up, this is what you need in order to report in that the behind the wheel training is getting completed for individuals. So you'll register your training location and you're going to be a behind the wheel training provider. You do register your location and not the instructor. So you can have multiple instructors. Also, and this is going to seem a little different given that we're government, but you're going to register as a private training provider and not a public training provider. And what that means is that you're not hanging a sign out front that says that you're going to start offering CDL training for a fee. So it means that you're just internally, just within your agency, providing the CDL training. So that's what a private training provider is, and that's what you register as. I did have a question that came into the chat. It says, how many hours are needed for the behind the wheel portion of the training? It's an interesting question. And the reason I say it's interesting is that Ohio law has a requirement, but because we're following the federal law, because we don't charge people to take our CDL training, there is no minimum number of hours required. So really, it's going to be based on what your instructor feels it takes for that person to be proficient. But you still need to document how much time they've spent at it, because that's an important part of the record keeping. So just keep that in mind as you go through. You'll probably hear from different, either technical colleges or truck driving schools that, oh, it's a minimum number of this hours and they have to answer that many questions. And that's all because they're charging for their classes. Because we're not charging, we aren't required to follow those Ohio regulations. And I have that in writing from the person who's the head of that. So, all right, we're going to keep talking here about the account. Again, I wanted to emphasize about the private training provider is not offering, means that you're not offering the training to the public for a fee. And I think that's a step that confuses people when they go to set the account up. Once your account's set up, you can start reporting training completions in as soon as you have people complete. So when you go to report it in, once they've completed their behind the wheel training, you do have to report it within 48 hours of them finishing that up, and you have to give their name, their date of birth, the driver's license number and the state where the driver's license was issued, the type of training that was completed, and the date they completed it. And I was going to show you what that looks like on the Federal Motor Carriers website, if they haven't logged me out yet. Okay, so this is what it looks like when we go to report in. So we have to put in the permit number. Hopefully you guys are seeing that okay. Oh, wait, yeah, you're good. You are. The state, their birth date, first and last name, and then, we select our training location, which in our case, it says ODOT because LTAP is with an office within ODOT. And then whatever endorsement it is that we have, like with the theory, then we do the A or B, and then we have to put a score in, and then the training completed. So you flip that over to, yes, get rid of that there, and we'll do the behind the wheel range. So you put the clock hours in, and then the behind the wheel road, you put the clock hours in as well. So you will have to have the number of hours total, and then the date that they completed it, and then you hit submit training record. This internal ID is something you can put in there if you want. We chose not to make up another tracking number to put in there. So, but I feel it's pretty straightforward on their website here for submitting. So I wanted to show you how that worked. All right, we're going to go back over here. And we did mention already, but I feel it's important to emphasize that once you have completed their training, take what was in that 3-ring binder. I don't care if you stick it in a filing cabinet somewhere and put a date that you have to keep it until on it with a sticky note or something, or you scan it in and keep it electronically, but you do have to keep all those sheets from all the days that they were out training for 3 years after they pass. That's part of the federal record keeping requirements. And once they have passed both the theory and then the behind the wheel, they can actually register to take their CDL test. The BMV, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, when they call to get registered, will check the Federal Motor Carrier System, the one I just showed you where we put the information in, and they will make sure that both components are in there showing that they completed it, and then they will go ahead and get them scheduled for the test. So that's what I have for you. Those are the steps that you would go through as an agency to get this set up, and we are happy to entertain any questions you have. I can go back to any part of this presentation that you would like me to. Feel free to put questions in the chat, or if you want me to unmute you, I'm happy to unmute you. Just drop it in the chat, or not chat, the question box, and I'll be happy to unmute you. I'm gonna scroll down to, I thought I saw somebody on here who I know has done really well with his own program. I'm gonna put Gary on the spot if he doesn't mind. I've just unmuted you, Gary. Maybe you could unmute yourself, and if there's anything else you'd like to add, because I know that they're in Dublin. You guys have been doing this for a while.
Yes, hello. Good job on the presentation for everyone too. Thank you.
Thanks.
So one of the things I just thought would be worth mentioning is that as everyone is utilizing Ohio LTAP for theory or doing theory in-house, when they move to the teaching their students to go out and do the range portion, that Ohio now has a supplemental that goes along with the manual. So I would definitely encourage everyone that's listening or viewing the webinar later to get a copy of the supplemental manual, so that when you set up your parking lot for your training, you will be training your students based on how the testing sites are handling their business now.
Thanks, Gary. Can you send me a link to that, and I'll include it in the materials we send out to everybody?
Yes, I'll do that right now.
Okay. And then we did have a question that just came in. It talks, how is the test scheduled again with the FMCSA? You don't schedule the test with the FMCSA. That's where the theory training gets reported when it's completed, and then the behind the wheel training gets completed. Gary, would you be willing to talk about how the test is scheduled with it's the BMV, right?
Yes, it is. So typically it's pretty simple process to be able to take advantage of after you have went to putting all of your information in your testing scores, the hours of training, you've totaled all that up and you've inputted that into the training registry. You can then immediately call your testing site of choice, depending on where you're at in the state, and then they are able to pull up your trainees' information based on their driver's license number. They can see that they have successfully completed all parts of the training, and then at that time, they'll go ahead and get you scheduled for a test. Did that answer the question?
It sure does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
And I did have somebody ask if I could provide information that I have in writing regarding the time behind the wheel being exempt. Yeah, Corey, I'll be happy to send along the email documentation I have on that. So great. And thank you, Gary, for letting me put you on the spot.
Oh, no, absolutely.
You
I
were
just
awesome.
sent that over so that everybody can take advantage of it,
Great.
to pull it from the resources. And we're
Wonderful.
always here, Victoria, just like you guys are. If anybody would ever need anything, I'm here as a resource as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, what other questions do we have from the audience today? It hasn't started snowing, at least in Columbus and down. So hopefully you can get some folks out there, get them trained. We had a question about how much does the BMV charge to take the test? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe if someone else wants to drop that in the question box and I'll be happy to read it off, someone who's possibly already sent people. Let's see. And then someone else shared that they use a one-page training report that has all the training for the behind the wheel and the range, and they got it from drivertraining.ohio.gov. I'll be happy to send that out as a resource too on the email. So I would say if you're getting that resource from that page, it's definitely an okay one for record keeping. So, all right. Any other questions? Do the trainers have to pass a test or get certified? They do not. They just have to meet those two requirements. Now, if you're an agency that's going to start charging people to take this test, or excuse me, take the CDL training, then there's a whole list of requirements for the state of Ohio. And yes, there's like training required and testing and annual recertification for CDL instructors. But because we are in a public agency and we're not charging for the training, we don't have to follow those regulations. Let's see, does ODOT still have their new employees that they train to get their CDL sign an agreement? As far as I know, they do. I haven't heard that that has changed. And what's being referenced there is ODOT actually, because we needed snowplow drivers, reinstated a classification that we had at 20 years ago called highway maintenance worker, but they only put level 1 in, and they hire people into that highway maintenance worker 1 for 6 months, and the person has 6 months to take the CDL theory, and they do it online as well using the same e-learning modules that we make available. And then internally, ODOT has individuals who meet the trainer requirements who will work with those folks who are trying to get their CDL to get them through the behind the wheel. And then once they complete that, they go and take the test. And if they don't pass within the 6 months, then they're, let go from the program, because the requirement is you do have to pass within the 6 months in order. And when you do pass, if you do pass, then you move into a highway technician position. Hopefully that answers your question there. Does the behind the wheel need to be in a semi or dump truck, or does it matter? It's supposed to be in the type of vehicle that they're going to be driving. And I know here with the ODOT program that they use the dump trucks, and that the dump truck is what the individual actually takes the CDL exam in when they get to the point of actually taking the exam to get their license. Who covers the liability on the trainer and any liability after the driver passes? That's all part of, and I'm not speaking from a legal perspective. I'm just speaking from the perspective of as an agency that employs people, the anyone who's employed for the agency is covered under that agency's liability. So if you're concerned about that, I would suggest that you talk to the legal counsel for your agency and have them give you guidance. But I know that here at ODOT, we are training folks to be CDL drivers, and once they're trained, then we send them out to plow snow. So ODOT covers all of that for our employees. Does the trainer have to complete the theory training also? It doesn't say that they do because they've actually already had the license for at least 2 years and been operating that type of equipment. But if it was me, I would suggest that they at least go through it. Maybe they don't necessarily have to take the exam at the end, but it would be good if they knew what the folks who they're going to be training had been through. Can one county send employees to another county for training? I think that's really up to your agencies as to how you want to handle that. I mean, to me, that would be a great way to share resources. But really, you got to work it out between yourselves as to how you're going to handle, that type of thing. So, and then someone clarified that yeah, just spelling on one of the words. So we're good there. I hope I've answered up. One more question here. If new employees leave within a certain amount of time after getting their CDL, do they have to pay back any money? I would have to get a copy of ODOT's policy, and I'll see what I can rustle up before I send all the resources from this webinar out and send it along so you can see what it says there. But it was my understanding that I don't know about paying any money back, but I do know that if they don't pass within a certain amount of time, that then they're let go. It says we have been told that if the other county has been listed as private, they cannot train anyone from other agencies. Okay. I can try to find that out. My thought on the thing is that, here at LTAP, we've listed ourselves as private, but we're offering this out to all of the agencies statewide. So I don't see where that would be different. But again, it's probably going to be up to your legal counsel as to how they feel about it. So I would definitely talk to them. And then another question that came in, adding passenger or school bus endorsement for a trainer to be able to train others. Will they need to go to private training to add this? Trainer currently has Class A with tanker, double and triple and manual, but not passenger or school bus. If there's not somebody else already in your agency that has those endorsements, then I would say that you're probably going to have to send them out to get those endorsements. The whole key with the way this is written is that you have to have somebody already in there who has at least 2 years of operating with that endorsement or license type before they can actually train. We were also wondering if we have an insurance pool. Can the pool register as a private agency and then the local cities can all train as the pool? That's a good question, and that might be something that would be best sent into federal motor carriers. They do respond to questions, and I have sent questions in on their website. Let me get on my PowerPoint here real quick. On the Federal Motor Carriers website, they've got where you can send questions in. They've got this contact link, and I've sent questions in, and they're pretty timely. I mean, it wasn't more than a day or two before they responded back to me. So I would probably send that question in and let them give you a response. Another question, if I just received my passenger endorsement, do I need to have that for 2 years before being able to train someone getting their passenger endorsement? Or since it's covered under a Class A or B? The way I believe the law is written is that you're going to have it for at least 2 years. I'm writing that question down, and I'm going to look up and make sure I send out the information in the law so you can look it over too. But I would take that and talk to your legal counsel just to make sure that they're in agreement with the way you feel that law reads. Can you send county truck to take the test? Yeah, I mean, as long as your agency, um, you know, is good with them taking the county truck to take the test, I don't see why you wouldn't. It would be okay to do that. You just need to make sure that your agency is all right with that. I know here at ODOT that they've done that. So once the LTAP theory training is completed, will ODOT train on the behind the wheel portion with our trainers? No, we can't. We just don't have, the staff to be able to do that. So pretty much I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that old philosophy of teaching a person to fish and then they'll be able to fish for themselves the rest of their lives. And that's what we're trying to do here is we're showing you what resources are available. And we were able to make the theory training available because that's the e-learning, but we just don't have a big enough staff to be able to take on training the behind the wheel portion for all of the public agencies here in Ohio. However, you can do it yourself following this process. And that's why, we were doing this webinar and we've got the 2-pager. And as Gary Browning from Dublin said, he mentioned on here, he is happy to be a reference for you too. And I'll include his contact information when I send this out afterwards. All right, any other questions? Anybody typing frantically, trying to get them in? If you are, and I end this webinar before you get all your typing completed, you are welcome to contact us at the email address there, the phone number. We're happy to take questions on this anytime because we do want you to use this resource, hopefully cut back on costs with getting people trained for CDL by leveraging the theory portion we already have out there, and then, having the clear roads materials that you can use in order to get your behind the wheel portion going. So, all right, I don't see any other questions out there. Yes, the webinar should be available to rewatch. We are attempting to record it, so as long as that works, we will get it out to you. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon, and thanks again, Gary, for letting me put you on the spot. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon, and we will see you soon on another LTAP webinar.